The interesting point, just a little bit of background. When we started this process with ESCA and with the guys at ADGM, we had to make a decision, I think, in principle, on whether we wanted to go down sort of the one country, one license route to say, and this also deals, I think, with a slightly more expanded view of financial services, or whether we wanted to create a particular set of rules to basically take existing funds that can run completely independently without ever, registering into the scheme, but essentially creating another layer of rules, which you can imagine is if you want to simplify things, the last thing you want to do is create another set of rules. And one of the main reasons, well, obviously it made it simpler because to go to Abu Dhabi and tell the guys, hey, one country, one license, let's just all, be happy, obviously would have taken a little bit longer. So this was a far more specific exercise. But the other reason why we did it is it now provides a blueprint for scalability. So to say now go to, say, the King Abdullah Financial District and say only for that district, if and when it ever comes up, to say if you opt into a common legislative regime, then within the framework of that was a key consideration for us in terms of it may sound counterintuitive to bring in a separate set of rules, but it, at the same time, I think makes it easier to make it scalable, just for the sake of interest. So, Mark, just to sort of finish up on your side, obviously in the platform business where you have sub funds, my understanding from Chris is that each and every guy will have to go and register and pay the fees, and this is essentially what Gateway does. What are your views in that regard?
I can, being ex-regulator and Chris' colleague, I understand where and the DFSA is coming from. Specifically, since I know how the fund platform rules will look like, and indeed the sub fund is viewed as a fund, a separate fund. It needs a separate application. Simply because it's you can have on the platform a private fund as well as a public fund. Very different risk profile, and I think, Chris, you alluded to that at the beginning. So I have some sympathy with that distinction. I would not have expected to see that differentiation. Having said that, what I would have liked to see is to potentially lower the fees for those sub funds, because part of the umbrella has been looked at by the DFSA and by regulators already. So if you add sub funds to it or cells, you simply create less work as if you would have come just fresh. And that obviously helps to convince ultimately the sponsor of a sub fund to go that route. Now, I'm sure that we will make use of that fund protocol, of these protocol rules for our DIFC funds by simply convincing the sponsors of these sub funds and our platform funds to be fully in compliant, because it's hard to argue not to use it if you are indeed planning to go down to Abu Dhabi. But on the fee side, yes, I think I mentioned that in my comments in writing earlier. But I understand the concept.
Yeah, I think the fees thing is fair comment, but I think once again, and I think the interesting thing to understand is and I don't want to speak for the DFSA, but I mean the idea is that it could be shared amongst the regulators, that fee, but you're just paying it over to ESCA. I don't want to speak for you, but it's certainly not a money-making opportunity for the DFSA. This registration fee, it goes all the way to ESCA.
Yeah, I mean it's allocated across the host regulators.
Yeah.
But I think Mark has made an important point. It is a departure from what the DFSA does at the moment. So if it's a public fund that's an umbrella, there's a registration cost of $1,000. Subsequent sub funds, they just come in. We need to get the prospectus. We'll do an assessment, but there's no charge there. exempting QIF funds, we don't actually charge for them to be established full stop,
Yeah.
whether it's the umbrella or the sub-funds. There is a different position there, but obviously there's 3 regulators. There needs to be a common position. So that's where the change has come in.
Just the other point on fees, obviously to have agreed to that, what's it, $9,000? $9,500 was obviously the existing fee payable for registration with ESCA. So there was this easy departure point, and in terms of leveling the playing field, we had to come up with an agreed number. If we did it for less, there would obviously be clear arbitrage opportunity, and people would flock to the guy with the lowest fees. What that unfortunately also does, as we all know this, and it's an easy starting point, but I think over the course of time, I think we all want that to be reduced. It's just now we have everyone, that has to agree to that, which is slightly more difficult. So just, bear that in mind. Those are the sort of the questions that, have been prepared for the panelists.
Yeah, I was wondering, is there a concept of pre-marketing under the protocol? So, for instance, if you're to use an analogy under AIFMD, I think you mentioned earlier, in order to access the passport, you need to have your actual fund vehicle established. But if before you've reached that point, if you're just going around with a pitch book, I'm just curious what the analysis is under the protocol for that.
Yeah, I mean, we would expect anyone conducting activities in or from the DIFC to, one, have a financial services license to conduct those activities. And I think, if you're out there seeking monies, we would expect the fund vehicle and the arrangements to be in place prior to conducting those activities, if that helps.
I mean, the way I look at it, obviously the rules are in place, marketing and promotion of funds, okay? So if you're in pre-marketing and you're at the point where it's not yet a fund, I suppose there's a little bit of a grey area where you can, you're not yet soliciting any form of investment into a collective investment vehicle. But it's a very fine line to especially if you consider, the advisory components, how quickly it is for the DFSA to say, if you've sent 2 emails to somebody, once again, I don't want to speak for the DFSA, but trying to impress upon somebody that this may be a good idea to invest in if and when the fund comes up, that may be seen as financial advisory. So I suppose you can get away with some pre-marketing, but the topic of today's discussion is once you have a fund up and running, how do you market and promote and advise and arrange around it?
So can we quote you? It's okay to do pre-marketing.
No, but bear in mind that all of the restrictions are in relation to funds or to particular financial products. So if that does not yet exist, what is it that you're marketing and promoting?
Yeah, I think it's the way I view it. I like your practical approach, and that's what we take as well. I think we all do in this room. But it's not so much we're covered here in the DIFC if we say marketing in or from the DIFC. That's what continues to be in place as a concept. I think where it becomes tricky is indeed when we look at the ESCA rules when it comes to the promotion of, or what falls under marketing of any financial product.
It's a very, very broad,
and that's sort of like
definition.
How they view it,
Yeah.
and I think that captures pretty much
Everything.
Everything. There's no distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Something on the positive side, maybe at the end.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.